In 1776, when George Washington crossed the Delaware, he was surrounded by men who were not only soldiers, but volunteer soldiers. He originally had over 2,000 men, but when their required service ended, they left. Yet these men right here in this picture decided to stay. But why? What were they fighting for? They were fighting for America. That's always the patriotic way to put it. But they weren't really fighting for America. They were fighting for freedom from Britain. George Washington and his men defeat those dreadful redcoats, and America was born. And what George Washington did in 1776 was the greatest piece of history that we can imagine. I mean, they did something that we take advantage of every day. They sacrificed themselves so that we could have the greatest country to ever exist. And that's exactly what this video is about.
Term limits will give the American people more elections and more open seats. They will bring new members to Congress who have different experiences and different ideas. That's what the American people want. Recent polls consistently show that 2/3 of the American people support term limits, and the American people will be watching to see who supports real congressional reform and who votes for the status quo.
Serving in Congress isn't supposed to be a career like it is today. Serving in Congress is to do just that. Serve. Serve the people, serve the country, and get out. Congressmen and women are supposed to go in, do their job, and leave. Let's talk about one more reason why term limits are a good idea. You, congressmen, have an approval rating of about 3%. I don't care who you blame, but something is wrong, and we need to fix it. No state wants to blame its own congressman, even if they are the problem. Now, term limits were a big deal in the 1990s, but you guys got lucky and it faded away. However, it's time that we actually fix this problem. 37 states place term limits on their state constitutional officers. It's time now that we follow their footsteps and make it national. Let's talk more logistics. This year, 2013, representatives in the House spent over $154 million just for your campaigns. That's an average of about $2 million per person per election year. And the Senate, a House with only 100 members, spent $68 million just on campaigns. That's an average of about $4 million a person per election year. A person.
Well, we have term limits for President of the United States. I think we ought to have term limits for members of Congress because the history of our republic, the framers never intended there to be professional politicians. That's why they staggered their terms. That's why they limited their terms. That's why the Senate was actually made up of members appointed by the state legislatures. They would be appalled by career politicians. And you can read their letters, you can read their writings. They expected these people to go home and retain their farms and stay as farmers and stay as businessmen and so forth. They didn't believe in a permanent legislative class. And as a matter of fact, Professor Rotunda has written that the House of Representatives turns over less than the House of Lords.
Yeah, you put that in the book.
Even in 2010.
Yeah, 2010 you pointed out 85%, which was a wave election. We call it a tidal wave election. 85% still got reelected.
Right, and some of them didn't run for reelection. Yeah. So, you have 85% incumbency, and we're cheering it, whereas, in the 1800s, you had 50% turnover after 2 years and 80% turnover after 4 years.
I'm here because I'm here because most Americans agree that it's time to fix a system that's been broken for way too long.